Do you ever feel stuck, like second guessing yourself, wondering if you're on the right path or questioning whether what you're doing is even working? That feeling isn't failure, it's simply being unsure. And in this episode of Undoing the UnLife, I'm going to break down what it's like in being unsure and where that creeps up into your life and how to get rid of it. So we're going to undo unsure and we're going to show how measuring progress builds confidence, clarity, and momentum. And how many times have you thought, am I doing the right thing? Is this even working? What if I'm wasting my time? What if I'm behind? And a lot of times that feeling, that quiet hesitation, that second guessing, that lack of confidence in your next step, that's not confusion. It's just being unsure. And here's the truth. Most people miss. You're not unsure because you're incapable. You're unsure because you're not measuring progress. And that's where we're looking to build a more powerful habit of measuring so that we can create and see the evidence, the measurement, the momentum, because confidence isn't something that you wait for. Confidence is something that you build. And the only way to have confidence, to undo unsure and be supremely confident in what it is that you're doing, that the next step is in the right direction, that it's going where it is that you want it to go. So let's dive into this, because I've seen it. And I love it. I see it in little kids. I see it in grown adults. I see it in college kids. I see it in the business owners that I coach. That unconfident, unsure of what it is, if what they're doing is having an impact, if it's getting them to where they want to go, and they don't know if they're growing, they don't know if they're improving, they don't know if their efforts matter. And if you've ever felt this lack of confidence in what your next step is, that just fills your brain with doubt. And you wonder, maybe I should be further. Everybody else has this stuff figured out. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. That fear and that doubt that creep in because you're unsure of the next step. You're unsure if what you're doing is working. And maybe you're grinding it out day in and day out, and you don't see the progress. And that just, it degrades you. It fills you with doubt. Because uncertainty thrives in the absence of measurement. And then sometimes that's all it is. All we have to do is measure what it is that we're doing. Maybe measure what we're feeling. Maybe what we're thinking. Because when there's no scoreboard, there's no tracking, there's no reference point. And your mind starts to assume that you're just losing. So there's an old saying that goes, judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. And it's a simple statement, but it doesn't take into account, right? It doesn't take into account how long that tree has been planted. It doesn't say how hard is that tree trying. How much does it compare itself to the trees around it? You ever notice that? You ever notice that we are the only species on this earth that compare ourselves to somebody else to judge whether we're doing this thing right? A tree just keeps on growing. Plant just keeps on growing. You think a tree ever looks around and says, man, look at how big that tree is. Why am I even going to try and compete? I'm just going to stay down here where I'm safe and not grow. It doesn't happen that way. And there's no reason that it should. It's not a natural occurrence. Self-doubt and lack of confidence doesn't exist. So why are you taking it that way? If we look at a tree and let's say we take an apple tree and we walk around and we say, hey, why aren't you an oak tree yet? Well, it's kind of a silly question. That's not what it is. It's not an oak tree. You can hang a sign on it and say, this is an oak tree. And you'll never get acorns from it. You'll always get apples. Even if it's fruit, right? So fruit trees, whether it's apples, oranges, pears, it doesn't matter what it is. If you've got the same roots, unless you've grafted branches on there, you're always going to get what was planted, what was in that seed. And that seed that was planted is the purpose. It's why you're here. It's the intention. So if we're not looking at this in terms of what that tree is producing, then we're measuring the wrong things. There's a saying that goes along with this that, a man can count the number of seeds that are in an apple. Only God knows the number of apples that are in a seed. And that when you really start to think about it, it really starts to blow your mind. And you look at the geometric progression of, hey, there's only a few seeds in each apple. But if all of those get planted and grow new trees, look at how one seed turns into hundreds of in thousands year over year. So if you're not looking at your life, and this goes for all areas of life, if you're not creating measurements along the way, then of course you're going to be unsure. Of course you're going to be unconfident. Of course you're going to be uncertain about where you're going, how fast you're getting there, and if you're on the right path. If you don't have the vision of where you're going, then you can't measure where you are, because that progress leaves evidence. And when you don't look for the evidence, you forget that you're actually growing. I love the analogy of, if somebody were looking at you from above and it feels like you're just running in a circle, what they don't take into account is looking at the elevation. You might be on a spiral staircase constantly going up. From the top, it looks like you're running in a circle. You're taking steps and you're gaining altitude. Do you remember when you were little? And I remember doing this, and I remember it so well that when I became a parent, I wanted a different way to do this, because it was so cool. But every time you either moved or you went somewhere else, you couldn't take the door jam with you. And what I'm talking about is when you're a little kid, you ask, hey, measure me. Right. And you run up to the door jam, and your mom or dad put a pencil across, and they mark your height, and they write down the date. And then you can see, you go back. A lot of times it was the next day, and you're like, hey, measure me again. I feel like I grew overnight. And we know that it doesn't happen like that. But when you started looking at it month over month, quarter after quarter, year after year, you started to see those incremental jumps of your height, of you growing. And I love that. So for my kids, when I started to have kids, I got a board. I bought a door jam, and I left it floating. It was just a piece of wood we had in the closet. And as the kids grew, our kids are kind of spaced quarterly, which kind of worked out really well. So on everybody's birthday, we measured everyone and made that mark. And you could see the progression of it. But they were always asking, I think I grew. Why as adults do we stop? Why did we stop? And we, a lot of times, the only numbers and things that we're measuring is our weight or our belt size and our bank accounts. There is so much other stuff that we could be measuring. Every area of your life has a way to measure it. And if we were just to think creatively enough, we could start figuring that stuff out. Because then you would see the growth. And I think that's what we miss. We look at the scale every single day, and we're like, damn, why didn't it go down? How come my bank account isn't where I want it yet? Why isn't my 401k $1 million? And that's the key. Is a lot of times we're looking at lagging measures. So one of the coolest things that I learned, and I implemented this in business and really truly learned it from 4DX, which is 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's Stephen Covey's kid's name, Sean Covey, maybe. I forget. 4 Disciplines of Execution. Either way, great business book, but teaches a ton on scorecards and how to actually start looking at the right measurements. Because so many times we're looking at a bank account or we're looking at a scale, and those things are a result, right? It's a lagging indicator of what's already happened. What I learned from that is to really look at leading indicators. And this came down because it became so clear once we started doing it, right? Lagging measures, the way to scale, what's in your bank account, promotions, the social media followers, right? They matter, but it's all after the fact. When you start looking at the actions, what actions are you taking in order to actually impact that lagging measure? Right? If you're looking at weight, it's how many calories did you consume? How much protein? What are the macros on your meals? How many workouts did you complete? How many calories did you burn? How many meals were planned? If you're looking at a book, like how many pages did you read in sales? How many calls were made? Conversations had, hours that you had on focus, days of discipline that compound over time. Right? And here's the key, right? Confidence comes from winning the leading measures. You don't control outcomes. You control your actions. So why not start measuring the actions that take place before they get to the measures? Because when you measure actions, unsure loses its grip, unconfident starts to flip around. When you can start seeing the actions start to build up day after day, week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter, and year after year, suddenly you're not focused on that number anymore because you know the impact that it's going to have. That's where measuring everything, especially in sales. I love it. I love seeing it in marketing and sales because everything is so measurable these days. And being able to predict whether it's with pipeline to the number of dollars, how fast those deals closed, and when that money is going to come in, that becomes exciting. That's when you can really say, yeah, I know what's happening. I know what we're doing. I know what impacts it. I know how to turn the different dials to make it better. That's the coolest part of being able to grow on purpose and be able to market and sell and understand what that's going to do for the business. Now, what if we just took that into the rest of our life? Because so many people, most people just measure the two things, their weight and their income. But life's bigger than that, right? There's so many people that say money's not everything. And you're right. No, but it ranks right up there with oxygen, right? You need the money in order to do the things that you want to do. But the other things that you can measure is your energy levels, your emotional regulation, right? Your consistency, your presence with family, the integrity that you have, the courage in fearful moments, and how you step up and step through, your follow through, your focus, your alignment with your values. What if we were to measure that? Can you imagine that? Because every time that you feel frustrated, anxious, stressed, and tired, guarantee there's a value issue, especially when it's with a job. If you find yourself hating your job every single day, day in and day out, that job is not aligned with you. It's not aligned with your values. It's not aligned with your purpose. Now, all you need to do is refocus and say, what is this job giving me that's going to get me to the next step? Suddenly that job becomes there's a different intent, there's a different purpose to having that job. Even if it sucks, even if you hate the people that you're around, what is it actually providing you right now? Yes, those are lagging measures, but you need to be able to shift the way that you think, the way that you feel, the way that your any energy is about that position in order to actually get to the next step. So ask yourself today, right? Did I keep a promise to myself? Did I show up when it was uncomfortable? Did I take one step forward? Progress is multidimensional. And when you track more areas, suddenly you gain more wins. You gain more confidence. That's what makes the difference. That's why tracking lots of different things makes you sure about what it is that you're going after, about making the right decisions. That doubt doesn't creep in anymore. So measure yourself against you yesterday. If you were to just become 1% better every single day and forget the rest, stop comparing yourself to others. No one has the same exact situation. No one has your unique identity, your set of circumstances, none of it. Comparing yourself to someone else or others is the fastest way to stay unsure, to stay unconfident, uncertain. Because you don't know their starting point. You don't know their support system. You don't know their shortcuts. You don't know the struggles, and you don't know their timeline. The only comparison that builds confidence is this: who am I today compared to who I was yesterday? Did you wake up on time? Did you show up sooner? Did you quit less? Did you speak up more? Did you stay disciplined longer? Did you recover faster? Small progress compounds, and confidence grows from accumulation, not perfection. Some days it's just about doing it. Some days it's just about getting out there. Some days it's just about putting in the work, whether you feel like it or not. So, first, pick what matters, right? Choose 3 areas for this season that you're in. That could be health, it could be wealth, it could be relationships, growth, purpose. What do we want to work on? Then define what are the leading measures? What are the leading indicators? Like what actions prove I'm moving forward? And don't give me the I don't know what to do bullshit. You do know what to do. You just don't want to do it. You don't feel like doing it. Nobody feels like doing it. That could be a workout. It could be eating right. It could be putting money in the bank. It could be getting a new job. It could be working harder to make more sales. It's all the little steps that add up to everything. Nobody feels like it. Stop whining and complaining. All you need to do is start tracking every single action that you take on an ongoing basis. The daily disciplines. Success shows up in the things that you do every single day in and day out. Show up, get shit done every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday, every Friday, every Saturday, every Sunday, and then do it again the next week. And eventually, I don't know when it'll happen, but eventually, at some point, you will start to see steps moving forward. You will start to accumulate the wins. And when you define what those leading actions are that prove you're moving forward and you start tracking them on a daily basis, as in what did I do today that moves me one step closer? And then you review that every single week and look for the patterns, not the emotions, because nobody feels like it. And that momentum builds up that certainty. That's when you start building the confidence. So let me leave you with this. You don't become more confident and then act. You act, you measure, you collect evidence, and confidence follows. You're not unsure because you're lost. You're unsure because you haven't been tracking how far you've come. So start measuring, start marking the door frame, start watching the scoreboard. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from seeing your progress. I'm Dan Beldowicz, and it's time to wake up on purpose.